Welcome back everyone to another episode of The Road Chose Me. My name's Dan and today I've got an electric Tesla. This thing is pretty sweet and it is early 2023 and I am choosing a new vehicle to drive around the world. And I have to say it would be remiss of me not to talk about electric vehicles. They get better and better every single year. So on today's episode, I'm gonna run through, can they even work? What are the options out there? What are the reasons that maybe one won't work? All of that. Let's look at some examples of how they do work. All of that coming up on today's episode. This is electric vehicles for global overlanding in 2023. Before I get too far into the video, I should talk about this thing sitting beside me. So this is a Tesla Model 3. I think by now pretty much everyone's seen one. And this belongs to a friend of mine, Andrew. His family actually have been all electric now since 2014 when they bought a Nissan Leaf. They've got 2 kids, they both commute to work. They're really active. You can see the mountain bike on the back. Normally they have a ski box on the top with all their skis and snowboards. And we're in the mountains of Canada where it's cold, it snows a lot, and they drive this thing all the time. They drive it up to the ski resort. Andrew drives it to work every day. So they've been fully electric now since 2014. And it's really incredible when Andrew's with me and, we go to buy gas or whatever in the Jeep. And he's like, what? You just spent $100 to fill this thing up? And he really notices how much the gas station stinks and how inconvenient it is. And especially at a diesel pump, you end up getting it on your hands and it stinks forever. So it's kind of funny to see that these guys have been living the electric life for so long. They've actually forgotten what it's like to have a non-electric car. And anyway, Andrew's an engineer and he loves running the numbers and looking into all the details. And so he has a blog called the Kootenay EV Family.ca. There's a link on the screen. I'll throw it down in the description as well. If you've thought about switching to electric, I think now in 2023, it's pretty clear. If you commute to work, let's say 100 kilometers or 100 miles, let's say most of your trips are less than 300 kilometers or miles, I think it's pretty clear that electric cars definitely work. They definitely are cheaper and they're better for the environment. So overall, electric cars are a win if you can shell out the expense. So that's Kootenay EV Family.ca. Check that out. It's a really interesting blog, just the reality of what it's like living with EVs. But anyway, that's what it's like, commuting to work, living sort of a normal life, let's say, with an EV. But what about driving around the world? What about the kind of expeditions that I like to go on? That's what we're here to talk about today. And the very first thing I think that comes to everyone's mind is people say, it can't be done. You can't drive an electric car to Argentina. You can't drive one across Kazakhstan. It's not going to happen. There isn't the infrastructure. That kind of thing is 10 years away. Well, okay. I kind of respect that, but what I really like to do in these situations is, it doesn't really matter what my opinion is, it doesn't really matter what anyone's opinion is, all that matters is the facts. So what are the facts that are on the table? Well, all we need to do is look at people that have already done it and what's already being done right now in electric cars. And I will say too, one caveat on this, there's always been that meme of like, you could drive a Tesla towing a trailer with a huge big diesel generator on it, and then you can go anywhere on Earth. Yeah, maybe that would work, probably. I'm just going to discount that and say that's not what I mean when I say it's going to work. Same goes for if you're like a multi-million-dollar expedition, like when Ewan and Charlie actually rode up from Argentina to North America. They had their electric Harley motorbikes, they had a Rivian, an electric pickup truck with them. They had the whole Rivian factory support team with them who were there to help diagnose problems. They also towed a generator around, that cost millions of dollars. You've got support vehicles, you've got camera crews. All the support vehicles were gas powered, by the way. So that again, I don't think counts for what I mean when I say, can you drive an electric vehicle around the world? What I mean is a regular person just jump in and drive it and have it be somewhat a similar experience to what I've done previously in my gas powered vehicles. So let's have a look at a world map and let's see what's already been done or what's easy to do. No doubt about it, North America, piece of cake, tons of charging options. Same goes for Europe. Same actually goes for Australia. EVs have been driven all the way around Australia dozens and dozens of times. People did it nearly 10 years ago in homemade EVs. These days, driving a Tesla around Australia is as easy as driving a gas car. So we can tick off all of those kind of developed parts of the country. You know, same goes for New Zealand, same goes for any country really that has great infrastructure and great electricity. Of course, when I do my expeditions, I like to get as remote as possible. First one when I drove the Pan American Highway. Well, actually, just this winter, a Tesla was driven all the way to the Arctic Ocean in Tuktoyaktuk in the middle of winter, -40 conditions. I've been up there myself when it was -48, and it's a serious thing. And yes, you can do it in an electric car. In summer, actually, it's a piece of cake. In winter, obviously, it's more of a challenge. The cold weather messes with the battery. But yes, it has been done. A normal person just did it. So all the way to the north of the Pan American is no problem. And actually too, doing some Googling, there were 2 guys in 2 Teslas who just drove all the way to Argentina. They convoyed together in Teslas, but other than that, they didn't have a support car, they didn't have a generator or anything like that. They drove the entire length of the Pan American Highway. So I think that also gets a green tick. Yes, you can do it. It is entirely possible. The next continent that I tackled was Africa, which I think parts of Africa are probably the least developed regions on the planet. So if there's anywhere that you can't take an electric car, it's probably there. But actually, it's already been done many times. It was a few years ago that a Nissan Leaf drove the length of West Africa. A lady actually just finished riding West Africa on an electric motorbike. And this is really cool. This gets me excited. There's a couple right now, they are driving an electric Skoda 4-wheel drive. Here's a photo. It's kind of a small little sedan, a little bit like the Tesla, I guess. They're driving it the length of West Africa, and they're charging it from solar panels that they're bringing with them. So this is such a rad idea. Every couple of days, they have to lay out all these solar panels on the ground. I saw a video, it takes them about 15 minutes to do it. And then they basically just wait while it charges. While it's charging for a whole day, they get about 250 kilometers of range, which is about 150 miles. Then they can pack it all up and keep driving. And you might say that's really inconvenient and that's terrible. But it's funny when I think about it. I drove 54,000 miles around Africa, and it took me 1,000 days to do that. That means I only drove 54 miles a day, about 100 kilometers. So them getting 150 miles of charge in a single day, they can actually do the trip faster than I did. So it occurs to me, you could drive, you know, let's say a couple of 100 miles, get to somewhere really nice, set up your charging, and then wander around the village, eat some street food, talk to locals, walk to a waterfall, stay in the same spot for a couple of days. Your battery's going to be full again, pack it all away, keep moving and do the same thing. Can it be done? Absolutely, they are doing it right now. And it's pretty exciting. They're actually in the Congo right now, which I think is the least developed place on the entire planet. So if you can drive an electric car across the Congo, I think you can drive an electric car anyway. So in my opinion, that gets a big tick for Africa in terms of can you take an electric car there? And then Central Asia as well. I did some Googling. As far back as 2016, people drove electric cars across Kazakhstan. There was a trip where people went around the world. They went to about 20 countries with their EVs. That was in 2016. That is a long time ago. I didn't actually spend that long Googling, but I guarantee you there's people who've driven right across all over the place. So in my opinion, that gets a big green tick as well. So what's left in the world? Antarctica? Yeah, I'm not going to Antarctica anytime soon. So I think, can it be done in an electric car in 2023? The answer is yes. Without question, people are doing it. It has been done. It doesn't really matter what I think. The reality is yes. The next thing to talk about is what vehicle would you actually take? And while there are plenty of options now, kind of sedans, small vehicles like the VW, like the Kona, the Teslas, I think they're vehicles that are really good on pavement. They can go on gravel roads. They're not really four-wheel drives, you know, they don't have the big suspension travel. And when I think about it, it's kind of the same reason that I'm not taking a van on my next trip, because I can't go to the final 10%, the final icing on the cake. I want to have low range four-wheel drive, and I want to really push to get that last part to drive up to the lookout or to get, you know, to the amazing waterfall or the remote spot that not many people get to. And I think if you drive, let's just say a Tesla sedan, you're going to miss out on those spots. You're not going to be able to drive there. So for me, I don't want to take a sedan like this. Clearly people are doing it and they're having fun. That's not the trip that I'm looking for. So then when I look at what vehicles are available, it really slims down the number of dedicated four-wheel drive electric vehicles that exist right now. Rivian make the pickup truck and they're about to have the SUV. There is the big Hummer, which is insane. The Tesla Cybertruck coming soon. There's the F-150 electric pickup truck, which I think is good, but maybe doesn't have great range. So today's market, there kind of aren't many options. And the other problem is they've all got really big wait lists. Even if I wanted to buy a Rivian, I'm sure it's more than a year until I can actually have one. In fact, Andrew, the owner of this Tesla, he's been on the waiting list for a Rivian since the waiting list opened. I don't even know how many years ago that was. So I kind of can't get one even if I want one. What I'm looking at though is a couple of years from now. So next year, Jeep are gonna have an all-electric four-wheel drive. They're calling it the Recon. Ram just announced their new pickup truck is going to have a 500-mile range, 800 kilometers, and it is a dedicated four-wheel drive. Of course, there's the Tesla Cybertruck. Love it or hate it, I think it's pretty odd, but it's coming, it's real. They are going to build it by the end of this year. Again, though, I think all of these vehicles, they're going to have a wait list. 2024, you'd be lucky to get your hands on one. Probably 2025 is when a normal person, who hasn't waited for years might be able to get one. So as much as I would love to drive one right now, I don't really think they exist or that I can actually have one as a normal person. We're just a couple of years away from that. I think another reason that a lot of people are hesitant to take an electric car is because they're worried about durability, they're worried about repairs, they're worried about maintenance. There's no doubt about it, this thing is a computer on wheels. It has an enormous amount of computing power and sensors and electronic controls. And if you're in Nicaragua and you start having problems with those, there is no Tesla service center in Nicaragua, then you're not going to be able to get it repaired. And so probably the burden is on you to try and figure it out. How much will you be able to do yourself? Will you be able to get parts flown in if you need them? All of those kinds of concerns. They're significant and I think they are warranted, especially when people are driving remote in Africa. They love to take, mechanically injected diesel engines. There is no computer of any kind. You can fix most problems with some baling wire and a hammer and some duct tape. They're fairly simple. They're really like tractors, those engines and all the associated systems. There's no ABS on cars that old. There's no airbags, all of that stuff. Obviously, electric cars are an entirely different thing. And I think it really just depends on how brave you are, how crazy you are, whether you're willing to go for it and take the risk. If this thing starts throwing all kinds of computer problems and just turns off and won't turn on, I think you're going to be stuck. I don't know that there's much you can do about that other than trying to tow it or flatbed it out of there and then ship it back to the developed world. So right now, I think that is also a limiting factor for electric cars. Personally, I like taking risks. I think it's part of the adventure. I mean, I took a fuel-injected Jeep around Africa. Everyone said don't do it, but I did, and I had a great time and it was amazing. If that computer had started having major problems, I don't know what I would have done. It would have been very difficult. Same story, I think, for an electric car. It's part of the adventure. And yes, it would be inconvenient to find charging stations or to lay out all your solar panels, but I think that's part of the adventure. That's part of the fun of it. I mean, driving across the Congo was inconvenient in the first place. I didn't go there because I thought it was going to be convenient and easy and straightforward. The challenge is the reason to go. So in terms of parts and spares and servicing, electric cars, they're getting there, no doubt. It's improving rapidly, but in the less developed parts of the world, you definitely are taking things into your own hands. And then the final reason I think that it's difficult right now to drive an electric vehicle around the world is the price. And part of that is the initial upfront cost. The new Hummer, the big Ram with the 500-mile range, the Tesla Cybertruck with a high range, they're all going to be $100,000 vehicles. Even I think the high-end Rivian is more than that right now. So first of all, you have to have $100,000 in the first place, which I don't have, but some people do. The other problem with that is though, and a lot of people don't realize this, when you go international, it is exceptionally hard to get insurance on your vehicle. So when I drove the Pan American Highway, when I drove around Africa, I didn't have any insurance on my vehicle. Yes, you're required to buy like third party at the border for $5 or $10, which in theory covers the other people or the other car. But in terms of your own car, if you crash it, if it gets stolen, if it catches on fire, it's gone. There is no insurance. Because of course, what company is going to insure your car in the Congo, in Nigeria, in Sudan, in Honduras? There is maybe 1 or 2 companies in the world that will insure them, but it is insanely expensive. I would have spent more on insurance than those entire trips cost me, so it simply was not possible for me. So when I think about it, if I go out and buy a $100,000 Rivian, am I going to feel good about driving it across the Congo, Sudan, Nigeria? Or am I going to be immensely stressed the entire time that if I lose it, I've just lost $100,000? That, I think, is another factor that has to be considered. And for me, I don't like gambling quite that much. You know, the Jeep I drove around Africa, that thing cost me like 30 grand all in, 40 grand. So I was sort of okay. I mean, I didn't want to lose it, but it wouldn't have been horrendously bad. The one I drove to Argentina, that thing was 5 grand. I kind of knew all along that if it burned to the ground or if I crashed it or lost it, that was fine. I could walk away and I'd be all right. But once you're up into 100 grand or more than 100 grand, that gets really tricky to deal with. So expense, I think, is another reason that it's tricky to drive electric cars around the world right now. So there's no doubt about it, you could drive an electric vehicle around the world if you wanted to. People are doing it right now. People have already done it on some of the most famous routes. So if I wanted to drive, for example, a Tesla, absolutely I could get one and I could go for it. I've already driven the Pan American, I've explored North America. The densely populated parts of Europe don't excite me too much. I still am really excited to go remote. And so for me, after all of that, I just don't quite think they're there yet. I'm just waiting for, you know, Jeep's all-electric four-wheel drive, the new Ram. There are so many options coming. Maybe 2024, maybe 2025, there's going to be so many more choices. And actually, the more I think about it, the vehicle that I've just bought probably will be the last internal combustion engine that I ever buy. Feels weird to say that, but I think it actually might be true. So I have actually bought the new vehicle and the build is just about to kick off. It's going to be a hectic scramble. We're trying to get it done for Overland Expo West. That is May 19 to 21 and that's in Flagstaff, Arizona. So I'll be there regardless if you want to come down and say hello. With any luck, the vehicle will be there as well. But if you want to get the behind the scenes scoop, if you want to see it, if you want to see photos of progress, the renderings, all the different features, all of that is over on Patreon right now. So I'll throw a link in the description. If you want to head over there, support me on Patreon. You get all the behind the scenes content. I'm having tons of discussions with my supporters over there about all the different aspects and the different pros and cons, as well as learning a lot from my supporters about things I've never done before that are going to be incorporated into this vehicle. So that's all over on Patreon right now. Tons to see there. Thanks again for watching very much, and maybe I'll bump into you on the road.